to make sure jy is on. Kan julle my skerm sien daarso?
Ek sien hom.
Okay, ek wil hom net hierso op dinge sit. Full screen sharing. Okay, so if you all can see my screen, I think we're gonna. This is an exceptionally interesting topic, and it's something we talk about. With it, at the end of the day, we worry about the animals and what the animals look like, but we never go across to the consumer and ask what the consumer actually wants. And whenever I give this talk, I am reminded that in the wine industry, I've yet to meet a wine farmer who doesn't taste his product and say, oh, the consumer is going to enjoy this. But in the beef industry, we never worry about our product and say, yo, the consumer is going to enjoy this product. Hierdie gaan die verbruiker regtig baie geniet. So I'm going to be, and thanks to them, I'm going to be, he's on, I see he doesn't want to, okay, there it is. Okay, so I'm going to just show you, I've borrowed some slides from, first of all, Cedric Strachan at MLA in Australia, and then Dr. Philip Strydom in South Africa for some work that he's done for us. So this was some of the research that the Australians did. I said 38% of it was research done on 200,000 consumers. 38% of consumers said they have difficulty buying beef to the quality they desire. 60% said they had difficulty predicting tenderness of the product. That which they eat, is it, or that which they see, is that which they're going to eat. 80% believe price was a poor indicator of quality, and more than 90% perceive fat to mean poor eating quality. And when they were asked, would they buy more beef if satisfaction can be guaranteed, just about 100% of people said yes, they would. The taste panel tests also showed some interesting results. It showed that the most important trait is tenderness. You can give people a piece of meat, it can have no fat in it or marbling inside the meat, and people will still say it's an acceptable product. But make meat tough, and they send it back and they say this is an unacceptable eating product. Juiciness, 10% scoring, flavor, 30% scoring, and then they score on the overall liking of 30%. The slide I don't have in here is that about 50 to 60% of Australian beef don't meet consumer requirements. And that's why 15, 20 years ago, they put MSA together to see if they can advance quality. If my friend Frikkie Neeser was on here, he would tell you that he had the worst steak he's ever had, but he's also had the best steak he's ever had when going back to Australia. So they've revolutionized their industry as far as tests concerned. The same people came to South Africa and did the same tests on about 800 Bonsmara types of animals. And interestingly enough, they found very little difference between rural and urban consumers in South Africa. We always have the perception that the urban consumer likes their meat really tender, juicy, etc. But the rural guy, to them it doesn't really matter. But proper scientific consumer tests that were done showed that there's very little difference between rural and urban consumers. And interestingly enough, there was very little difference between South Africa and Australian consumers. We enjoy the same steak as what they enjoy. And our industry also said it will support a system that describes quality based on sensory scores, like I showed you previously. And even in South Africa, there's a willingness to pay if the data gives clear indication that consumers, or the data gives clear indication that consumers are willing to pay for a higher quality product. So a good question is, what influences beef eating quality? And the first and main factor, if you think about our classification system in South Africa, our classification system in South Africa only has two criteria. And guys, you're welcome to put up your hand if there are any questions in between. Izan will alert me that you put up your hand, and if there's any questions, let's have some discussion. So if you look at our classification system in South Africa, you'll see it classifies animals on only two things. And the first is age. The young animal gets rewarded, and fat depth, subcutaneous fat depth. The fat, if we look at this picture over here, the fat, or the second picture here, the fat on the outside of the animal. So those are the only two criteria that are used in the South African meat classification system. So it's what we would call a minimalist system. Somebody like Dr. Philip Stradham will tell you it doesn't speak to the consumer at all. It simply gives a minimal requirement, and in my opinion, it's completely outdated. It's 30, 40, 50 years old now. It was adopted from Ireland 40 years ago. And I think even the Irish have moved on. But there are moves afoot from scientists to see if they can put a grading system in place. And Dr. Philip Stradham is working on that. You might have heard he's left the ARC now, Agricultural Research Council, and he's moved to Stellenbosch, where a unit has been put up, meat unit has been put up for him to look at these attributes. So the first thing that affects meat quality is age. But the interesting thing is that even age of the animal, if you look at countries like the US and America, I was going to show you this slide. They've moved away from age as a score of meat quality. They use dentition. So they look at the vertebra, how the vertebra of the animal is busy ossifying, how it's busy getting hard, hoe hy hard word. And here you can see an interesting graph. So there is 0 teeth in the animal. So this is their index, as they call it, the index scores their 4 attributes as I showed you earlier on. And you can see an index, the higher, the better. You can see for age does have a definite difference. The younger the animals, the more better you're going to score an index. However, if you look at age, you'll find, and then you've got 2 dentition, 4 dentition, 6 dentition, and 8 dentition. Old animal we cut off here in South Africa on a 0 to 2 dentition. You'll see here that there are animals, for example, on a 4 dentition that have a better eating quality, for example, than an animal that have a 0 dentition. Or even more interesting, an animal on 6 dentition that has, I should be looking at this side of the graph, 6 dentition that has animals that also provide you with good quality, that can provide you with good quality meat. You also a score of 65, above 65. So they've adopted, as have the Americans, they've gone away from age and looking at teeth to a ossification system. So in their meat grading, they don't use teeth, they now use ossification and how the animal is ossifying. If you look at last week's Landbouweekblad, you'll see Professor Frikkie Neser from Free State University has actually written an article on this, or part of the article is on this. The second thing that is considered in a meat grading system that affects meat quality is obviously fat depth. We don't want animals to have no fat, but we don't want to have animals to have too much fat either. And so fat score also is, or subcutaneous fat score is also always part of a grading system that affects meat quality. Thirdly is tender stretch. They find, so where we hang carcasses in South Africa on the hook like this, they will hang carcasses, I can't remember the bone that they hang it through here, but they will tender stretch all their carcasses. This is the Australians and the US, for example. because it provides strong scientific evidence that it makes the meat more tender, and that you get a better eating quality out of meat. The fourth thing that is in every grading system will be marbling. Marbling are the flecks of meat inside the steak, and there's a significant positive correlation between marbling and juiciness and taste, and there's some correlation, not 100%, but about 40–50% correlation between marbling and tenderness, but it does affect juiciness and taste. So the marbling inside the meat definitely affects eating experience. Then what will be measured on in a grading system typically will be the eye muscle area, how big that eye muscle is, because there's a negative association between eye muscle area and marbling, for example. The more marbling in meat, the smaller the eye muscle. But the correlation is not 100%. So you can select animals that are marbled that also have a big eye muscle. And alternatively, you can measure animals with a big eye muscle that also have some marbling inside. We'll talk about hormones and steroids just now. And then there are breed effects. Americans and Australians will typically in Australia want 75% Bos Taurus type influence, the British breeds or the European breeds, and Americans typically cut off at 50% Bos Taurus influence. If there's too much Bos Indicus in it, they will also discriminate against the carcass, and you'll get a significantly lower premium for your carcass. Are there any questions so far? I usually get a lot of questions on these criteria that affect meat quality. Any questions so far? You're welcome to put up your hand. Scott, any questions from your side? Andy? Awesome. I'm just trying to see, trying to cut in there. Andy, let's start with Andy, and then we'll go to Brink. Andy, any questions from your side? Remember to put up your hand, and then Zaan can just call you in. Andy, any questions from your side?
Yes, Michael. I'd like to know, with the marbling, is there any correlation between tenderness with marbling?
Yes.
Is there any evidence that the more marbling there is, the tender the meat is? Or, you know, you can give a guy a perfectly nice piece of marbled steak, and if that person doesn't know how to treat and handle the meat either, I think a good word to use would they bugger it up and make it an unpalatable piece of meat too. So I think what needs to be brought into the equation too is the education of our consumer of how to prepare his beef, how to prepare a good piece of beef also, whether it's well marbled or less marbled. Is there a correlation between tenderness and marbling, and are we going to address via media, via advertisements, via whatever you have it, to educate our consumer how to treat his product?
Andy, I've got it. I've got half an hour. So let me answer you quickly. The correlation is about 40–50%, Andy, between marbling and tenderness. So it's not 100% correlation. You can get meat that has no marbling in it, but that's still very, very tender. However, there's a very strong correlation between marbling and juiciness and taste. And often taste panel consumers will get confused. If you give them highly marbled meat that's tough, they'll still say it's tender, but it's because they're eating juicy meat, if I can call it that, that's actually tough. So they confuse the juiciness with tenderness. But as a rule, the correlation is not 100%. You can get meat that's got no marbling in it that is tender. As far as the education side is concerned, unfortunately, the budget from the levy, etc., has hardly any money for marketing. But fortunately, if you drive around Gauteng like I do, I live in Pretoria, you'll see the big billboards from Spur and Dross, etc., always put a piece of steak up there that's almost rare inside. And they are almost doing the job for us to educate consumers that you always eat meat medium to rare. You never eat meat well done, because then you're destroying the steak that you eat. And it starts with us as farmers, like the wine farm example. It starts with us as farmers understanding our product and being able to teach our friends in the city how you should eat meat. Brink, I think you were the next question.
Thanks, Michael.
Thanks, Andy. That's a good question. Any more questions? Okay, it looks like I've addressed, I thought John would have a question, but it looks like I've addressed most of the questions. I just want to see if I can get through my PowerPoint, because there's still some interesting. So this is an interesting slide, which I showed you guys. If we could move on, we would change things. Zitza, jy het 'n vraag? Zitza? Ek sien jy het jou hand op. Okay, Zitza's taking his hand down, so obviously I've answered his question. Okay, so this is in this last week's Landbou Weekblad, and I think it's worth considering. Then obviously, Zitza, ek sien jou hand nog op. Het jy 'n vraag?
Zitza, unmute yourself dalk net.
Goeiemôre almal. Die vraag is gestel na aanleiding van jou stelling dat oogspieroppervlakte is negatief gekorreleerd dalk met marbling. Dan beteken dit ook so dat netvoerinname en groei is negatief gekorreleerd met marmering.
Presies reg, Zitza. Presies reg. Jou dier wat meer marmering aansit, is geneig om die dier te wees wat minder doeltreffend is.
So dit beteken ons het 'n indeks nodig om die ideale dier dan te selekteer met beide eienskappe.
Presies reg.
Goed. Okay.
100%. Ek is baie beïndruk met daai vraag. Maar daar's nie so 'n ding soos 'n dom vraag nie. Jy moet altyd gerus wees om vrae te vra. Okay, so net om vir julle te wys wat stres doen, stimulante, selfs genetika. Ek moes in Ethiopië 'n konsultasie doen oor dog cutters, stres wat daar so plaasvind. In daai geval was dit boran. 80% van hulle diere is boran. Hulle is geneig om gestres te word as hulle vir die eerste keer in hulle lewe op betrok gesit word en dis meer. En 30-40% van hulle vleis was daar cutters gewees. En ons moes daaraan werk om dit uit te sorteer. So, how you handle animals, these are the things that handle stress causes dog cutters. Zitza, jy wou iets sê?
Nee, ek's reg.
Okay. How do we measure tenderness? Two ways. The one way is the machine is called a Warner-Bratzner shear force test. We cook the meat in a special bath to make sure it's evenly cooked and distributed throughout. We take a centimeter square cube, we put it into a machine, and we measure how the Newton, how that machine cuts through how easily the machine cuts through the meat. And that is a very high correlation with tenderness. So we measure it objectively in the laboratory. There's a lot of work going in internationally to see if we can measure tenderness on the carcass itself. I don't have the machines here, etc. Maybe that's a talk for another day on all the scientific and technology that's going into the objective measurement of tenderness and marbling, etc., on the carcass in the abattoir. But just for now, this is how we measure tenderness. Then these are Dr. Philip Stratum's slides that I'll show you, 4 or 5 of them. Even in South Africa, if you can provide proof that your meat is tender compared to tough, you'll see that it's starting to develop a discourse between the two. And so as a cutoff with shear force, the norm, international norm, is 4.6 Newton per kilogram for retail, good enough, good eating experience for retail, and 3.9 kgs for restaurant beef. And then I'm going to show some slides. The societies, hopefully they don't mind, but I'm going to show you where we are at in South Africa at the moment through our beef genomics program 1, where we tested a number of breeds on tenderness and tenderness in those breeds. There was Santa Gertrudis, for example. So these were 33 animals, not a big sample, but I always find that interesting. A farmer will produce one animal that looks good and they'll say that's how the animal breeds. Our scientists don't work like that. We want at least 100 or 400 or 500 animals in a sample before we really start drawing conclusions. So these are just indicators. Please don't draw conclusions. And every year you're saying that you had a talk from Dr. Mike Bradfield, and this breed is tough or this breed is tender. I'm telling you that these are small samples, but still they're indicative of, I think, overall result. So 33 Santas, for example, as I said, 3.9 good enough to eat in a restaurant, 4.6 good enough to eat at retail. So you'd see about in a retail, I would say about a third of animals for this breed is good enough for steak at retail level, because we've done no selection in South Africa at all for tenderness. If you look at Simmental, I'd say it's a bit more than that, possibly about a third to also about a third of animals. Have a look there just at the restaurant. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of these 53 animals are what we consider good enough for restaurant. Of course, that's why we age meat now for a month, so that we can push this figure up. But this is if you went straight and you ate that animal with very little aging. Simbra, also about half, and as I say, it's small populations, but 70 animals over here. Just gives you an indicative of where we're at. And then Brahamn, you'll see very similar to the rest. Professor Frikinius always says the best steak he's ever eaten in his life comes from Brahamn, and the toughest he's eaten in his life also comes from Brahamn. But there's significant variation. If you look at the first animal here, exceptionally tender meat. You look at the last animal here, exceptionally tough meat. So there's a lot of variation for the breed to work with to improve tenderness. Brangus, only 6 samples, so we can almost draw no conclusion, except to say there's, even in these 6 animals, there's a lot of variation between the one that is tender and the other one that produced tough meat. Just on the effect of Zolmax, this is the control. Meat, best scenario and worst case scenario. Meat is reasonably tender, good for the supermarket, etc. This was done even after aging, if I'm right. You put Zolmax in, immediately the meat becomes tough. Same with the second animal, same with the third animal, same with the fourth animal here, even though the effect here wasn't that small. So there's a definite and significant effect on tenderness of meat using these steroids or hormones or whatever you will call them. So the companies might argue that they don't affect the consumer, the effect disappears, but the effect is definitely there in the meat quality. And that's why a lot of your grading systems will say no hormones allowed in the meat, because it makes the meat tough. Just a final slide. This is what's happened to our carcass weights over time. 93, the average carcass in South Africa weighed 210 kgs. By 2013, they weighed 266 kgs. If you go to somebody like Robin Watson, Spencer Watson, beef poor, average carcass there now weighs close to 300 kgs. So we can see over time how carcasses have got bigger and bigger. I know sometimes from producer side there's a big shift or drive to make carcasses or your breeds smaller and smaller and go for the indigenous African breeds. But remember, you're going to get discounted 4 or 5 rand a kilo for your beef if you go that. So you've got to decide yourself if you're going to follow the market and see how you can adapt to the market trends, or whether you're going to be prepared to take a significant discount on your carcasses at the end of the day, because this international trend is continuing. Okay, so but the question that's always posed is, how does these bigger carcasses affect chilling? I know I now work a lot in abattoirs, and it definitely affects chilling. The bigger carcass needs almost a day more to chill, and that costs money. And then, of course, the drip and the tenderness and the color, etc. How does a bigger carcass affect that? And that's where the research at the moment is looking. So, basically, just to show you how color variants, etc., the different things we look at in meat quality. But I still think this is quite interesting. Okay, that's just about my time up. I'm going to allow 3-4. I started a bit later just to get everybody on board. 3-4 minutes on any questions that you guys might have on this part of the discussion. Kom Dolf, jy het dalk vir my 'n vraag. Of Jan Lou?
Michael, it's Andy again.
Yes, Andy.
Do you foresee that the feedlots are going to start buying heavier carcasses for their for their growth? I mean, if the carcass end weight is getting heavier, their starting weight should also be heavier then. If
Yes,
I'm correct.
Andy, it's happening already. They already are strongly encouraging farmers to start backgrounding the animals themselves.
Okay.
I don't know if you've picked that up in your Freiburg area.
Why I'm asking is exactly that our average weaning weight is 300 kilograms, and previous years we've always been penalized because our animals were too heavy. Now we found it's reversed. We're almost getting a better price for our heavier animal. So I was just wondering, are they going forward? Are they starting to follow the international trend now too? Or the housewife, is she looking for a bigger cut? Or the restaurants looking for bigger cuts? Or is it just a trend that's happening?
No, Andy, it's all good observations. So if you remember in that where there was a shortage of weaners, when the weaner price went up to, if I remember correctly, 38 rand or something like that, 36, I remember that year. What the feedlots that year did was they actually kept the animals for longer on feed. So they themselves pushed the carcass weight right up. And they find that the unit cost in the abattoirs is far cheaper if they slaughter a bigger carcass than what they're slaughtering a smaller carcass. Because one of the big costs in the abattoir is staff. So to slaughter a bigger carcass is cheaper than to slaughter a smaller carcass. And then they discovered that if you have a sharp knife, you can cut a retail cut to the size that you want. The trend is for people to have smaller portions of beef. Let's talk about rump sirloin, ribeye possibly. So rather than having a whole ribeye, people now have a half a ribeye or fillet is smaller. So the trend is to have smaller portions, but more high quality portions.
Okay.
We're going to hit a Drimpelwater, a thing where abattoirs, they will then have to change their whole setup if they go above a 300 kg carcass. But if you look at Tommy's in the Western Cape, probably the best abattoir in South Africa today, it's a brand new. Any of you can ever want to go there, I can arrange it for you. Tommy's will tell you that he's already set up his abattoir in such a way that it can handle up to 350 kg carcasses.
Okay.
So
Okay.
that's definitely the way things are going. I've got 2 minutes for one or two more questions. Corey, you quiet? Okay, thanks, Dice. I see you've joined us. Scott, any questions from your side? Okay, so that'll end that part of the discussion. Izan will now come in and she will talk about another important but difficult to measure trait, which is feed efficiency, and discuss the very interesting topic between post-wean and feedlot finishing, which I think very few people understand. So thanks for your attention this morning. Izan, is nou oor na jou.
Baie dankie Michael, as jy net jou screen kan stop, dan kan ek myne share.
Okay. Hierdie gaan eintlik moeiliker wees as wat ek dink, want een of ander rede wil hy nie uitkom nie. I think, if I remember correctly, Mickey at one stage had the same problem. Okay, there we go. New share. Or no, not new share, stop share. There we go. Okay, Zaan, dis nou oor na jou. En ek vra maar die sprekers om te kyk of ons in ons tyd kan bly.
Doe terug. Okay, good morning everyone. So I'm going to speak about feed efficiency. So feed efficiency is one of the most important economical traits currently in both the feedlot and the grazing environments. About 80% of weaners in South Africa currently goes through the feedlot, and feed costs amount to up to 60% of their total costs. So feed cost is extremely important for them to produce their beef efficiently. And what is also important to remember, that there is also a cost involved with the feed on the farm. Your grazing, you do not actually see the cost that you have for your grazing, but if you did not graze the grass yourself, you could have rented the farm and received some money for that. So there is a monetary value associated with the grazing on your farm. So you need to keep that in mind. And then also if you need to supplement feed your cattle in the winter, that is also a cost. So even on extensive farm, there's also a cost involved with the feed. So previously they used feed conversion ratio as an indicator of feed efficiency. So it is the amount of feed consumed divided by the live weight gain, and the typical ranges was between 4.5 and 7.5, and lower is better, less feed per kilogram of beef gained. But it is a good measurement for feedlots, but not for breeding. And why do we say that? As you have an equation here, the feed divided by the live weight gain, you do not know what you actually select for. Do you select for less feed, or do you actually select for higher weight gains? So if you select for improved feed conversion ratio, this might result in increased genetic merit for growth, increase in mature cow size, and then ultimately an increase in feed costs for the cow herd and for feedlots, etc. So it does not make sense to actually select on feed conversion ratio. So scientists developed a trait they called residual feed intake, and it is phenotypically independent of growth, other than feed conversion ratio. And first, I just want to explain the difference between residual feed intake and net feed intake. It's exactly the same trait. Net feed intake is used in Australia, and residual feed intake is used in the rest of the world. So you might see if you use Breed Plan, they give out a EBV for net feed intake and not for residual feed intake, but it is exactly the same trait. So residual feed intake is defined as the difference between an animal's actual feed intake and its expected feed requirements for maintenance and growth. So your efficient animals eat less than expected for their body weight and average daily gain. So they normally have a negative or low RFI value or net feed intake value. And your inefficient animals eat more than expected and they have a positive or high value. So currently, residual feed intake is the best available measure for feed efficiency, as it is independent of the level of production, and that is important. So you actually do not influence your growth or any other production trait, for example, fertility, etc., if you select on residual feed intake. So where can I test my animals? There's a number of test stations in the different provinces. The ARC has their feed intake test stations. They're all phase C test stations. They currently have the Callan Gate system implemented at the test stations, and they are all over the country. Then there's also the Grow Safe systems. There's one at ARC Irene, but this is currently mainly used for research purposes. And then there's a newly installed Grow Safe system in KwaZulu-Natal at Mooirivier, and it's called Livestock Alliance Efficiency Center. They only started to test animals recently, but they are currently open for commercial or anyone to test their animals there. And then we have a Grow Safe system in Namibia as well, Gentex Sol. Meki will give us some more information on Gentex Sol later on. So which animals should be tested? So first of all, you can only test animals for residual feed intake if they fall in a specific age range. So for the Callan Gate systems, you can only send animals there if they are between 180 and 280 days of age at the start of the adaptation period. And then for the Grow Safe system, there's two different tests. There's the post-wean test and the feedlot finishing test. So the only difference between the two is the age at which you test your animals. So for the post-wean, you can send animals between the age of 200 and 300 days of age. And for the feedlot finishing, you can send your older animals at 300 and between 300 and 400 days of age. So that's the age ranges, and then you can test wool, steers, heifers, etc. But what is extremely important is that you can only test animals within their contemporary groups. So this is very important. So as with the other traits that we measure and receive EBVs for, breed plan can only analyze the data if you record them within a contemporary group. So a contemporary group for feed efficiency is animals of the same sex born in a specific herd within a 60-day period. And we want to genetically link our contemporary groups to other groups. So we want to have more than one sire's progeny in that specific contemporary group. So the minimum group size is about 5. You don't want to have less than 5 animals within your contemporary group. So this will mean that you might have 2 progeny from the one sire and then 3 progeny from the other sire. But we recommend that you try to have a group of at least 10. So yeah, the data that you get from that is better for the analysis. And then breed plan also recommend that you at least weigh your animals for 200-day weight before you send them to the test. So if we look at the NFI EBVs, Brahamn in South Africa and Namibia is the first breed that actually received a net feed intake or residual feed intake EBV. And breed plan currently published 2 EBVs, one for the post-wean and one for the feedlot finishing. So it's NFIP and NFIF. So the only difference, as I mentioned earlier, is the age at which you actually test your animals. There's a high correlation between the 2 traits, but you would find that some bulls re-rank between the 2 traits. So if we look at an example, this is from the Namibian Brahamn database. There's an animal that has a net feed intake for the feedlot finishing phase of minus 0.67 kilograms. We measure net feed intake in kilograms of feed. So if we need to interpret this, we look at the breed average of 0.04 kilograms, and we say that his progeny on average, that is important to remember that is on average, his progeny will eat 0.315 kilograms less feed per day than the average Brahamn calf. So that's how you actually interpret the EBV. So selecting for feed efficiency, if you select for residual feed intake, a 5% improvement in feed efficiency has an economic impact 4 times greater than a 5% improvement in average daily weight gain. And what is also important to realize that there's considerable genetic variation in residual feed intake or net feed intake that currently exist among the individual animals within a breed. So if there's variation, you can actually select on it. So that's the importance of having variation available that you can actually select on. And then the other thing with residual feed intake is that it is fair to moderately heritable. It's about 0.29 to 0.46. This might differ from population to population, etc. But what it means is that you can, in a reasonable time, select for improved residual feed intake. So you can make substantial genetic progress if you select for improved feed efficiency. So the fastest way to make genetic progress within your herd is to select for bulls that are genetically feed efficient, and therefore you would select bulls with negative or low RFIs. So if we remember correctly, your bulls have a very big genetic impact on your herd's genetics, because you use one bull on 25 or 30 cows per year. So the influence of the bull's genetics is much greater. So if you want to make fast genetic progress, you can start off with selecting feed efficient bulls. And then your cow herd over a few years will change in terms of feed efficiency. So studies have shown that when you select for low RFI bulls, it will result in progeny that consume less feed for the same level of production as progeny of high RFI cattle. And this will be realized as feed savings for calves in the feedlot and for your replacement heifers entering your cow herd. And what studies also have shown is that animals that test as feed efficient in a feedlot system or a testing environment will also be efficient on grazing. So if you select for RFI, there's going to be effect on your feed consumption within your herd, but there's also a number of other positive effects that you will also see within your herd that might have an environmental effect. So if you select for decreased RFI, studies have shown that you can lower your maintenance requirements for your cow herd by 9 to 10%. You can reduce your feed intake by 10 to 12%. It has no effect on the average daily weight gain or on mature cow size. You can improve your feed conversion ratio by 9 to 15%. And then also you can improve your calf weight per cow feed intake by 15%. You can lower your methane emissions by 25 to 30%. You can lower your manure production by 15 to 20%. And you can lower the heat production by 9 to 10%. And what is very important for a cow herd is that it does not affect your fertility in your herd if you select for decreased residual feed intake. So in conclusion, feed cost is one of the biggest costs in beef production. So to remain competitive, I see there's a spelling mistake, beef production needs to become more efficient. So we need to, or we have restricted natural resources, but we'll have to increase our production to feed an increasing human population. So the answer to this is that we need to improve feed efficiency with increased production. So we need to decrease our feed intake, but still increase our production. As you heard, from the previous talk, we need to still increase our carcass sizes, but we want to do this with less feed. So, any questions?
Izan, it's Dolphia. Listen, for Michael, the question is actually for Michael. Michael, how do this compare with the previous presentation, your presentation? Efficiency and fat and marbling. Did they look at that?
Yes, Dolph, I think Andy mentioned it as well. There's a slightly negative correlation, a bad correlation between efficiency and fat. Your fatter animals aren't as efficient as your fatter animals aren't as efficient as your animals with better meat quality. But I'm actually going to introduce Meki now, and I'm going to show you what a selection index can do. A selection index allows you to select across a wide range of traits, even those that are antagonistic to each other. So you can have your cake and eat it. You can have an animal that is efficient with good marbling, and that's what a selection index pulls out for you. You can have a low birth weight or lower birth weight with a high weaning weight, because the two are highly correlated. You can have a ox that grows well in a feedlot that comes from a small cow. That's what a selection index allows you to do. And we should actually, Johan Steiger, I don't know if you were able to attend Johan Steiger's presentation when he gave it, but he talked about selection indexes.
Okay, thanks.
But I'm gonna let's just take some more questions, and then I'm going to introduce Meki to you. I should have introduced Izan. Izan is the LRF technical officer that works on our beef genomics project and also does technical stuff for our society. So typically, Andy, what Izan does is, for example, diagnostics on bulls, etc. I think she's sitting with 4 or 5 diagnostics at the moment that she's got to do, where farmers query the EBV of a bull. She then goes in and does a diagnostic on that animal, for example. You'll also see her writing articles, etc., for breed societies. John, that's something for you to consider in your breed society if you want articles. Izan writes excellent articles. She's already writing articles for the media as well now, and they gave her an excellent. They called her article excellent, one of the best that they've had. So that's something that you guys can do. I see, Corey, you've got your hand up. Is it Corey Avenant? Corey, you just need to unmute yourself. I'll see if I can unmute you. Izan, maybe you should unmute Corey from your side.
I think I'm unmute now.
Good, Corey. Welcome, Corey.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you for this morning. Izan, good morning. A question to you. You've made a statement that the animal whose feed efficiency in a feedlot will most probably be a good grazer, have feed efficiency as a grazing animal. Can you share that reference with us, first of all? And secondly, what is the strength of the evidence of that reference?
I'll share it with you. They actually have different ways of measuring feed efficiency on grazing animals as well. Michael, can you remember what they actually call the machine they use? But they actually use, it's high tech, and they use gases and stuff.
Izan, sorry, if I can rephrase maybe the question. Where's the article? Can you give us the name of the article, the page of the article where you find that statement? Because I think it's an extremely important statement that if an animal is efficient in feedlot, it can be also as efficient as a grazing animal. So where did you get that evidence of that article? And what's the evidence of that? How strong is that evidence?
Michael,
if I can come in here, Thijs, you also come in. Thijs, maybe you come in here.
I didn't pick up the name of the guy that asked the question. Nevertheless,
It's Corey Arbenant, Dr. Arbenant. Yeah.
We had the pleasure during one of the previous visits to Australia to, at one of the research stations, see some of the practical research where they measure the methane gas emissions of animals and try and get that correlation. So this is ongoing research. It's in early stages, most of it, where they're trying to develop measuring practices using methane gas emissions and trying then to understand that correlation between grazing patterns and feed intake and. So there are many scientists all over the world, and obviously most farmers that are keenly interested in this topic. The measurement science is the key challenge, not the science itself. The correlations, there are some studies done, but not many of them that suggest that this is the case. But Michael, you add to this.
Yes, Corey, if I can come in, I'll send you a paper from Dr. Paul Arthur. We actually had a whole Stockman school that was focused just on feed efficiency. And Paul is the world expert on feed efficiency. And he published his papers where they took the progeny of animals that were in feed efficiency tests and then took them back to the field and their progeny back into feed efficiency tests, etc. And the correlation was about 30-40%, if I can remember correctly. An efficient animal in the feedlot also produces an efficient animal in the field. That was for Bos Taurus breeds. Studies haven't been done for Bos Indicus yet, but the studies have been done for Bos Taurus breeds. But as Thijs says, the studies are also ongoing. GrowSafe is also putting a lot of pressure, a lot of research into that phase. But there are scientific papers that are published, and I can show you I'll send you the results.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, next is Scott Marwick.
Hi there. Thanks for the discussion this morning. I've just got a question on those contemporary groups when it comes to testing on RFI. If I heard correctly, you're saying that it's basically only comparable animals that come from the same herd. What I'm sort of asking is, what if in one test group there's 10 bull calves from a sire coming out of one herd and 10 from the same sire coming out of another herd? Are those not basically able to be compared and a link between those two herds created in a test?
Izan, you want to take that?
So yeah, if there's a genetic correlation between the two groups, as you say, progeny from the same sire in different groups, they will be or not directly compared to each other, but there will be links between them. So if you have your 10 animals from one herd, they will directly be compared to each other and the other one, but there will be a genetic linkage between the two contemporary groups. So the analysis will take that into consideration, but only from one herd they will be directly compared.
Okay,
it's a good question, Scott, and you're quite right. That's why when we set up our beef genomics program, we tried our best to link the different test stations to each other through the use of semen used across herds and test stations. So if you, for example, got a test station effect, is a big effect on an animal. You can't directly compare Freiburg to Glen to Natal, for example, and say the food conversion ratio or net feed intake in Freiburg was this, in Glen it was this, because the feed might even differ. But if you set up your design as such that you have bulls that have progeny across the test stations, it's exactly the same as a breeding value. Then you can directly compare the animals across each other and across contemporary groups.
Okay, yeah, that's what I was mainly trying to get at. If they're at the same station, then hopefully that is a benefit to actually try and create and better accuracies on EBVs if they can be linked between bulls in the same same station. But you've answered my question. Thank you.
Good. Any more questions? This is always an interesting topic of discussion, I can see.
Michael,
Yes, and
I've got a question for Izan. Is there any correlation in cow size with RIF?
RFI?
Is there, sorry, RFI. Is there any correlation in the size of the cow with the feed intake? Is it going to be a bigger cow? Is it going to be a smaller cow? Is it going to be a medium frame cow? Is there any sort of data or anything that shows that it will be what it will be? Will it be a big cow? Will it be a small cow? Will it be a medium-sized frame cow or something like that?
Well, studies have shown that there is actually not a correlation with growth and mature cow size. So you can actually select for smaller cows and efficient cows in the same basis. So yeah, it's not directly comparable or linked or correlated. So it does not mean that if you have more efficient animals, they are going to be better. Okay. So there's no genetic correlation between, or I won't say no, but the correlation is low. So
okay, thank you.
Izan, if I may just come in here, the other comment that's relevant here is that in South Africa, to my knowledge, there are very few, if any, breeds that measure cow size and has developed enough data to create that potential correlation and understanding thereof. So if we want to go down that road, we need to implement a measure of cow size, hip height or shoulder height or whatever height we want to implement to get to understand that better.
And if I can come in here just after taste, the correlation between food conversion ratio and cow size is about 70%. So if you're measuring animals that are more efficient on food conversion ratio, you're making your cows bigger and bigger. And that is the reason why scientists moved away to a trait that teases out feed efficiency. We want to say for the same size animal, for example, a 480 kg cow, which one's calves eat less? But you've got to put them into an index as well. Otherwise, you're going to make your animals smaller because you want to gain on the one side. You want animals that grow, but they must eat less, if you see where I'm getting to. But if you select just on feed efficiency, on food conversion ratio, you will have cows that get bigger and bigger because the correlation is so high. And that's why we moved to net feed intake. Any more questions? You can put down your hands, those of you that have asked. Corey, I see you and Scott. You just click on the hand there and then it goes away. Okay, I want to...
Mike? So
yes.
Mike, can I
sure.
put a question? Yeah, great.
All right.
Good morning, everybody, and really interesting. Thank you. Thanks, Mike, and thanks, Izan. These tests are expensive for us as producers to do, these RFI tests. And how do we get rewarded? I think that's quite a relevant question. And when I think about the feedlots, because they're also benefiting from this, maybe we should be joining hands with feedlots because they're going to get a great benefit. And how, when we got these good feeding bulls that breed the progeny that go into the feedlot, we don't get rewarded at all as producers. How do we try and get the feedlots on board?
John, I'm sure Thijs and Mickey is always going to say something, but my experience with feedlots is that they simply start ignoring your breed and say, you know, this breed doesn't grow. Therefore, we're not going to be taking this breed into our feedlot. This breed is very inefficient. Therefore, we're not going to be using its progeny, or we're not going to be bringing them into the feedlot. The feedlots don't work on a reward system. Slightly, maybe. They will say, okay, Limousin cross grows well, but they're rewarding you for growth. But if they get the perception and they do their own tests they will simply start moving away from your breed and not select from your breed. The guy that I work with, we have a small indigenous breed in South Africa. It's got a lot of patterns on it, so you can guess the breed. We get discounted R4, R4.50 to R5 a kilo because our breed doesn't meet the feedlot requirements. So they don't say we're going to reward John Devonport because his animals grow. They say we're simply going to not allow these animals into the feedlot because of the perception about certain traits on that animal. So the progressive breeds and breed societies breed those animals that do better in the feedlot without the expectation of having a feedlot pay them more. It simply becomes a dominant breed in a feedlot over time. That's our experience, and that's my experience of talking with feedlotters. They'll tell you the breeds that they don't want in a feedlot. They're already at that stage. Whereas 20 years ago, any breed would go into a feedlot.
Michael, I agree that they just regard meat as a commodity. They don't really care at all. But they definitely going to have to change because they are feedlotting for the consumer. And the way we're headed is the consumer should be number one. So maybe they are going to have to change their ways.
John, I'll also put out onto, if you go onto the YouTube, you'll see there's a Livestock Registering Federation channel. I'll put on there a video that shows as we move into genomics, where Angus is now at the stage where feedlots will go, they'll do a genomic test on an animal, they'll see what its feed efficiency is genomically, they'll see what its carcass merit is genomically, and those are the animals that they will be buying. So they'll do it on a hair sample test, and it's not quite there, but it's about a year or two away from them doing that. So again, breeds that have been progressive will get rewarded, and breeds that have been laggards, waiting for the feedlot to reward them for that stuff, simply get ignored and discarded.
Thanks, Michael.
Okay, so I want to introduce Mickey Schneider to you guys. Mickey is also one of the progressive producers that we work with, and he's got, as he's answered, his own feedlot station. I found this the day before yesterday on Mickey's Facebook page. Mickey's been selecting on what we call the RAN indexes for the last, I'd say, 15 years. So right at the bottom of here, you'll see Mickey's 23 bulls that he's going to be putting with his group of cows this year and their breeding values. So this is just proof to me that indexes work. Mickey's speaking about feed efficiency, so that's something else. But if you look at the indexes at the bottom there, weaner or feedlot index, for example, is about 2 standard deviations above average on feedlot index. If you look at where he is with scan results, ultrasound, muscles, etc., you'll see he's right up there in the best of the breed. If you look at days to calving, the fertility, you'll see he's one of the best in the breed. If you look at growth, you'll see he's in the best of the breed. Birth weight is on average, and his gestation length is shorter. So this is what happens with index selection. You simply pull all the other traits in the correct direction. And I think this is an example, the perfect example of somebody who follows the science of animal breeding, and the results then sort themselves out. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Mickey Schneider to you guys. Mickey has been Farmer of the Year in Namibia, and he's also been the Landbouweekblad Breed Plan Stud Producer of the Year in Southern Africa. Thanks very much, Mickey.
Okay. Michael, thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. If you take away your screen, Michael, maybe I can share my screen and try to get going. If it works, it will take a bit longer from Namibia, but let's see if I can get it going. Okay, is that okay, Michael?
We can see your screen, Mickey.
Okay, Michael's gone. Good. I was asked by the team to make some comments about the feed efficiency test station at Gentex Sol, which is our privately owned test station. and I will share with you a couple of personal issues, and just to inform you how important it is for us to do these tests. So I will quickly talk about why feed efficiency, then the number of definitions, which Izan has also touched on, Gentexol, the company, how we acquire data, and then how we take these results and how we implement them. And I will elaborate on the process which we followed before we had an EBV, and then I'll conclude with a couple of challenges which we have and which we are going or are addressing. I want to start off with this slide. We have to double the food production on the same or less land for a couple of million people in 2050, and we have to do this with more effective production methods, and we have to adapt to climate change. That word climate change appears everywhere, but for Namibia, where we are very prone to this on the one hand, but the market itself, if you deliver into the niche markets of the world, that producer will look at how you produce. So this is very important for us. And this is from Charles Darwin. It's not always the strongest of species that survives, not the most intelligent. It is the one that can adapt the quickest. And I think for us in Namibia, specifically now, with limited natural resources, this is the way we should go, and that's why we have invested on here. Just to see where we stand in poultry and beef, that is the ratio of feed compared to 1 kilogram of weight gain, and you can see that we are far behind, and that's why poultry and pigs are much more efficient in that respect. And the reason mainly is we haven't selected for real feed efficiency yet. I want to talk about residual feed intake. This maybe will repeat a bit what Izan said, but it's the difference between an animal's measured feed intake and it's expected, take into account the requirements for maintenance and growth. That's its heritability, and then very important, they feed can be reduced by 12%, and methane up to 30% less. Tace has spoken about those chambers which we saw in Australia, and manure also by 70%. The last two are important environmental issues, which the niche markets in the world will look at. Then the profitability, the feed efficiency. Johannes mentioned a figure of 60%, my figure is 70%, but a 10% of improved average daily gain leads to 18% improvement in profit. A 10% in feed efficiency leads to about 43% improvement in profit. Now, Gentexol itself, it's a privately owned company. We bought the system in 2016. It was launched in March 2016. It's located at my partner's property, Okabatuta near Hoogveld in Namibia, Epi Fisher. It was one of the first auto stations in Africa with direct online data capture in real time. This station was manufactured by GrowSafe. It was implemented there, and we can take up to 96 animals on a go in one test with 8 troughs. Up to now, we've tested 1,252 bulls in those 4 years from 16 different Namibian sub-breeders. We've We've tested 941 Brahmins, 190 Simmentalers, and 121 Zimra animals. Just for those who are not so familiar, the animals are RFID tagged. If they stick their head into that bunk, the antenna which sits in this ring around the perimeter here will give a signal to the computer and will note the animal. It will weigh the trough up to a 10-gram accuracy. It will measure it every second, and when it pulls the head out again, the system will know that animal is gone, and the next one will come in, and data will be collected. At Gentexol, we can allocate 99% of the feed to an animal, which is very good internationally. It's a real-time data transmission to GrowSafe in Calgary, in Canada, where they accumulate all the data apart from the computer there also. The animals are weighed at the start of the hybridization, at the start of the test, then on a weekly basis, and then at the end of the trial. That's how we do it. And that's where the weights come from. At the moment, we run an adaptation period of 21 days. The test period is 70 days. That has been accepted internationally as a norm in the United States and in Australia. GrowSafe automatically analyzes the data for us according to the contract which we have with them, and the data is then also sent to the integers and to breed plan. The cost per animal for us, which is 6,400 per animal, it is a high cost, but there is a certain weight gain during the test also, which you should consider. But let's carry on first. We believe that that's the true efficiency measurement. Design has elaborated on that. The old phase C and phase D tests are actually irrelevant. But as a first approach, when we do these tests on a weekly basis, the raw data which we get, it shows incredible differences for each kilogram of weight gain. We've got animals which have 3.71 kilogram of feed for 1 kilogram weight gain, but there are also animals which go up to 11 kilogram for 1 kilogram of weight gain. And that is for every breed. There's no one breed. The Simmental, Zimras, Brahamn, we've got now a brown Swiss in there. Between the breed is a larger variation in the breed than within breeds. I could just maybe mention Simmentalers eat much more, but they are just as efficient as the other animals. Our target is to breed animals going to about 4 kilogram of feed to 1 kilogram of weight gain. That's raw data, not EVVs. What we do usually is, this is the period before EVVs. We had EVVs, and I want to take you through this quickly. If you accumulate all this data, there has not been an EVV in the last 3 years. How do we make use of this data? This is a typical example here from the first tests we did. We look at the average daily gain and the actual residual feed intake index in that contemporary group, which we get back from GrowSafe. And this method we used for the last 3.5 years until we now have got EVVs for RFI. So let's quickly go through this. You saw this table here on the right. It's the same table here, and we make a scatter plot here with residual feed intake on the y-axis and the average daily gain on the x-axis, with 1.4 being the average here for average daily gain. And you can see for the various animals in that contemporary group, they lie at various points here. The question is, where do you want to be? Now, we aim for a low RFI, which means you want those which are below the x-axis. Those are the more efficient ones. But you also want animals which grow. So that is to the right of the y-axis. So the animals which we aim at in our selection is in the right-hand corner here. Those are the animals which we would like to select. It's of little use to have an efficient animal which doesn't grow. So, so from the grow safe feedback data, that is what we did in the last 3 years. That's how it looked like. That's a high RFI, low average daily gain, and we want to be in the lower right-hand corner here. These are two bulls which we identified. There they are. We have selected them in 2017 already. They've been in the herd now. Both of them are presently in the herd. The RFI values are, we had hoped that they would be better, but I think they are still far above average. For every test of bulls which come back, we select those which did the best, and we look at them again. We watch and monitor their growth. There are two typical bulls. Which one is more efficient on the raw data? And you will see that the left one is more efficient than the right one, but visually you will not be able to pinpoint that. There was a good question earlier today, which was on the feedlot versus the range and conditioned. That's a debate which is still ongoing. The reference which we have is Dr. Paul Arthur from the University of New South Wales in Australia. He is internationally recognized by experts as the RFI expert. I think he's retired now, but he did a lot of work on RFI about 20, 30 years ago in Australia. And there are two specific articles which I could share. They've got a high correlation between feed efficiency and feedlot conditions. My figure is 70%. I noted Michael mentioned a lower figure. This is important for us because most of our cattle run on rangelands. There are certain, a part of them go to the feedlot. That is one issue, but we have to maintain them on the rangelands. And this was Namibia's vegetation index last year. On the left, with the drought which we had the last 4 or 5 years, and this on the right-hand side gives you an impression of how it looks today. But we have to monitor that left-hand plot here, where the most important profitability factor are rangelands and your stocking rate. So if I could have double as efficient animals, I could double my stocking rate and double my profit. That is a simple equation. I'm not doing this for anybody else. I'm doing it for myself to be a bit profitable. The question which John posed on the feedlots, I'm actually amazed that feedlots in South Africa have not taken this up yet. I would have measured every animal like we do a Gentexol, and after 30 days or 35 days, I would have a good look at those which are inefficient, and I would take them out as a feedlot. There is a lot of additional information here which we are not going to touch on today, but this is a good MSC study. There are different types of animals and eating habits, which one could also get out of this information every day. I've mentioned that we now have, we've tested a couple of bulls now at our herd, 480 Brahamn bulls, which we've gone through now. We've looked at the raw data, and it's now evaluated at Armadale by breed plan. And the Southern African Brahmins have got far more than 1,500 RFA data now. I think we are looking at more than 2,000 now already. But we led the process with Brahmins, and Brahmins is the first breed which now have the value for feed efficiency at the bottom here. Here at the bottom here. And what I want to show you is, this is an old bull, it's a 2011 stud sire. He himself was not tested for RFI, but he's got an RFI value now because of all his progeny. And within the Brahman herd, we've got a lot of old cows here which have got an RFI also. And that's the way to go then, to look how we can improve that. So that is what we're going to do. That is the plot Michael has shown, and the reason why I show it here is because we are strongly focused in all the other traits. We are small curve vendor herd total. All 23 sires, which we've got a 2 breeding season per year, they on average, all the bulls have got a slightly below average birth weight, above growth, and what is very important for us, a lower mature cow weight. These two are usually you've got with high growth, you've got high mature cow weight, but you can select for that. We did that. You've got milk above average, and all the other traits which Michael have mentioned. But the reason why I show this is these are RFI values now, EBVs. We have not selected for feed efficiency yet, because we didn't have the breeding value, which is only available since March this year. But we are now strongly focused on this one, and we have just acquired a new sire. He's in the top 1% here. You can see at the right-hand side, he's in the top 1% of the breed for feed efficiency. We've put him into the cow herd now, and I'm sure he will make a big contribution to improve the next generation of animals which are much more efficient. I showed you the other graph, which was a graph on the index from GrowSafe for that contemporary group for RFI. And then on the x-axis, we had the average daily gain. In future, since we've got EBVs now, we will plot the EBVs here on the left-hand side, and we will take 400-day weight growth as the EBV. And the scale is not correct here, but forget about that now. We could also take the 600-day weight. We will play around with that, but we will select those bulls which have got a good growth and a good net feed intake based on EBVs in future. If I come to the challenges, what's privately owned, it needs to be profitable, and we have to get throughput. So the throughput is very important for us. The occupancy now is about 70%. We were successful in the first round to reduce the old test with the old Kelly gate system, as the ARC has stipulated, with 112 days. We got them to accept the 70 days, which is, and 21 days adaptation, which makes it 91 days. We can have a turnaround of about 4 tests per year. 91 times 4 is 364. So we've got 1 day to clean it. And this has been accepted by the ARC and the BGP project, as well as breed plan. That's 70-day test with a 21-day adaptation period. That's what we did up to now. However, the latest GrowSafe system says that the test can be reduced to 41 days, plus about maximum 14 days adaptation, which leaves us with 63 days. This will have a big implication on the feed cost, and it will have a big implication on the cost of the test itself. But to reduce that, you will have to weigh the animal on a more regular basis. And the way GrowSafe proposes this is that you implement a GrowSafe beef system, which is a water trough where the animals are weighed on a partial weight, while they stand and drink water, and that will up the accuracy of the weights much more, and that's why they claim you could reduce the number of days. We are in negotiations, but in the meantime, my partner and myself, Abby Fisher, we anticipate that we will get there one day. So we have ordered the GrowSafe beef system last week. It's about $500,000 investment again. We've made the first down payment, and we will hopefully implement that system hopefully this year, depending, of course, on the travel restriction. We've engaged with Preplan and others to investigate the merits of a lower, shorter test. We've encouraged GrowSafe itself to make the test acceptable by the Beef Improvement Forum in the United States, which sets guidelines for trade measurements. And we've also engaged AGBU on the merits and how to scientifically verify it. So we will go down this road with a shorter test. I think the feedback from Brad Crook at Aubrey is that for those breeds which have an EBV, it might be acceptable. He said he thinks his system is robust enough. Those were his words, but those breeds which have not gotten RFI, I think the guideline is that we stick to this, the 70-day test period. There on the right-hand side, on the left-hand side, you can see the GrowSafe grow system at Gentexol. The feed bunks, there are 8 of them. On the right-hand side is just a picture of what we've ordered, and where you take a partial weight of the animal every second that it stands there, and every time it goes and drinks water, you will have a good indication of the weight gain of that animal, and you will have thousands of weights for a specific animal. In summary, we are convinced that for us, RFI is the next thing in animal breeding. It's a true measure of feed efficiency, and it's all about focusing on the profitability of the livestock sector. And if we had just an auction about a month ago, and the first bulls came in with a higher feed efficiency, with feed efficiency figures, and we could already see a trend by some buyers going for those bulls with high feed efficiency EBVs. So it's all about profitability of the livestock sector. Together with that, there's a very important drive internationally that we must limit the carbon emission, especially also methane, and that is a very important future marketing aspect also if you want to go and market your beef in the higher, more profitable markets. we did embark on a method or selection of those the raw data and the data we got, then the data which we got back from GrowSafe, and I would recommend that to any breeder or breed. Do that, get going, select for those animals which you are at the bottom right hand corner there, which I showed, and once you've got an EBV, that's a different playing field, of course. And for Brahmins, this has now been published on a routine basis since March, and I think we have Genetexol have also made a big contribution to data acquisitions for RFI. That's all I've got. Michael and Izan, if there are questions, I would be glad to answer them.
Yes, if I can come in here, let me find the applause button here, because I think it's exactly the case. You guys have made a significant contribution to feed efficiency, and especially the LRF breeds. And we really appreciate that, and the contribution you have made to Southern Africa. As you say, you were the first one to put in the test ahead of the research stations in South Africa, and I think they found that difficult to accept, that the farmers are actually now going ahead with this technology. And there's one question that I've got here on the chat group. You will see there's a chat there. It's from Dewald. He says, in die afwesigheid van 'n teelwaarde vir net feed intake, hoeveel waarde is daar in die gebruik van 'n individuele dier wat baie goed gevaar het tydens so 'n toets? So om byvoorbeeld 'n bul te gebruik wat goed gevaar het as 'n individu. So Mekkie, as jy dit wil antwoord, anders sal ek dit antwoord. Met 'n kontemporêre groep bulle, as een baie goed vaar, is daar waarde om hom te selekteer.
Wel, Michael, dat is precies wat ons gedoen het. Zelfs bij de eerste toets, of bij elke toets, kijk ons naar hierdie grafiek van average daily gain en die residual feed intake index for that contemporary group. That's what we get back from GrowSafe as when we pay for it. In that scatter plot which we made there, select those animals which are here on the right hand corner just to get started. I mean, it's no use accumulating data and not having value of this. This is an expensive test. So the more we start early for selection, I can mention another example, Michael. We, as a herd, introduced semen of bulls in the mid-1990s, in Brahamn specifically, for meat tenderness, and we can see the benefits now already. In the first 10 bulls on your Brahamn graph there, the 6 come from the Ukapra Brahamn herd. So if you start early in selecting for those bulls, and that's what you should do with this question, go for the right-hand corner bulls with good average daily gain, a good feed efficiency, just to get started.
Yes, if I can add there, don't wait for the feedlots to start rewarding you, because then it's already too late. Okay, are there any other, I think there should be a number of questions. Any more hands?
Michael, ek sien Corrie het weer 'n vraag.
Corrie, nice to have you part of the group. Go ahead with your question.
Thank you, Michael. I have to say congratulations to Mekkie. That is really a wonderful study, this. And if you look at the evidence strength of this study, it's at least level 3 because it's prospective, but because it's paired, it's level 2B, which in scientific terms extremely strong and very well done. Michael, I think this is the kind of evidence that we need, not only as producers to make decisions, but societies as well. The question that I have then, is there any studies been done between the relationship of a low RFI versus marbling tenderness?
Yes, as I said, and I think that was what Andy also showed. Indicatively, Corey, and this is a challenge for the breed you've got with your Wagyu, for example. Indicatively, the results show that the more you select for meat quality, marbling, etc., the more inefficient your animals become.
Do you have references for us of that?
Yes, I'll find a reference for you.
Thank you.
And that, yes, Mickey.
I can come in here. In the graph which you showed right at the beginning, in every breed you will probably have genetics, those outliers which have good marbling and good feed efficiency. Maybe only 5% or maybe 2% or 10%, I don't know. But those are the type of animals you should select to get going. I think Michael is talking about the average for the breed, but there are these specific animals, these curve benders for growth, and if you can be successful in identifying those sires which will make a difference, that is I think that's a trick. There will be animals which have got these traits. They are probably rare to find, but that's what you as a breeder should focus on.
Yes, your quadrant thing, Mackie, you can almost go back there quickly. It's terribly important for producers to understand is that you'll have animals that fit every part of the quadrant when there is not such a good relationship. Now with meat quality, marbling, and feed efficiency, the relationship is not strongly negative. It is slightly negative. But with that quadrant that Mackie showed, let's say it's slightly negative. Still 40% of your animals are going to fit into that quadrant, for example. You know, and that's where you do your selections from. And that's why developing an index becomes so important over time. But then you have to have the data on feed efficiency to select, to get those, what we call curve benders. I'm going to now, unless there are any other real pressing questions, I want to move on to Thijs, because I see we're running out of time a bit. It's 11:15. We try to stick to time as much as we possibly can. Thijs has headed up our beef genomics project and been an exceptionally strong driver for our move towards genomics in South Africa. He's also sits on our board and an executive. And Thijs has kept himself abreast with when I showed Thijs Mackie's selection results, Thijs immediately said, "But you haven't seen mine." And Thijs would, if you go to the internet, you'll see Thijs is also right up there as one of South Africa's top producers. So it's always nice having Thijs as part of the thing. Thijs is an engineer by training, and he's actually in Saudi Arabia at the moment on contracts. So Thijs, it's nice to have you and to talk about fertility measures in beef. While we're freezing with cold here, Thijs will tell you it's probably 35 to 40 degrees where he is at the moment. Good stuff, Thijs, and just make sure you're not muted. Okay, Thijs, I see you got to just unmute yourself. Well, I'll do it for you, yeah, if I can. Thijs, if you can just unmute yourself.
Unmute.
Okay, there we can hear you now, Thijs.
Okay, let me try again. Can you hear me, guys? Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you clearly.
Okay, good morning, everybody. I provided one or two small inputs earlier, but nevertheless, I'm going to try and get through this quickly to my clock. We don't have lots of time left. I was asked to talk about fertility measures in beef and more specifically to the difficult to measure traits. Most of you have seen this before. Basically, we're saying total testing should focus more or less on those percentages where fertility becomes one of the, and is always one of the most important aspects in beef breeding. And the fertility measures that we believe are applicable are typically days to calving, scrotum measurement, age at puberty, postpartum anestrus, and semen quality. So I'll be talking about those and what has been done about them and where's the science at this point in time, and comparing that to our current day practices and what should we consider going forward. Let's just start off with basics. Performance equals what we see in an animal equals a contribution by the environment and the genetics. The genetic component is inherent to the animal and transferable from one generation to the next. Management influences part of the environment and not correlated to animal capability. Low heritability implies more or most of the observed performance is due to environment. Comparison of performance only possible within the same environment, therefore the same management group. Guys, I know this is extremely basics, but if we're not on this page...
Michael, have you shared the screen? Is this correct? Yes, I don't see your full screen. Maybe others do. Maybe it's only my computer here. Michael? He's on. Yes, just carry on. Okay, thank you. Sorry.
Ons sien hom nie in presentation view nie, Thys.
Wat sien julle hom as?
Ja, ons sien net hy's vas op een slide, Thys. As jy slideshow klik daar op jou menu, Thys. Die menu heel bo, slideshow.
I am on slideshow, Michael. In the slide.
No, it's not scrolling. Yeah, I think now you're doing something. If you click on the menu on top, the slide, there we go. We see now back to basics. But if you just scroll down like that, that will also work.
Yeah. So I can't see what you guys see now. 1 second. Let me see whether I can change the. Hello.
We can hear you, Thys. We can see you on back to basics.
All right. So if you can see that I'm on back to basics, that the screen, I've changed my internet connection now. Hopefully that has helped. Did it move on to the next screen?
Yes, it did.
Okay, good. And then in that case, I will just continue in this fashion. So as far as this is concerned, let me just get rid of that there. The important part is that comparison of performance is only possible within the same environment and therefore the same management group. And the reason why I'm focusing on this is because of fertility generally being lowly heritable, which in practice means that what most breeders and cattle farmers see, very astute cattle farmers, all of us, in practice, is generally the effect of the environment, the effect of our good or less appropriate management practices. So it is quite complex to understand and make sure that when we talk about genetic progress, we actually recognize and respect the fact that your excellent management practices will take care of the bulk of what you will see. But this discussion is focused on that small portion of fertility that can be transferred from one generation to the next. And it's significantly important to do that. Llewellyn Angus has published in Farmers Weekly and in Landbou Weekblad this article earlier in the year where he has summarized his views, and it's very practical stuff about fertility and it's, the components thereof, the low heritability and the fact that days to calving is a good measure and the fact that hybrid vigor could improve on that. Let's just for a moment focus on the popular measure of intercalf period or tussenkalf periode, as we Afrikaners name it, or Simdex, which is a derivative thereof, or Bradex. It's the popular measure for productive traits, and it is used irrespective of the management group or the environmental differences between the management group or the seasonal differences. So that's the key practical aspect of tussenkalf periode as it's being used popularly today in Southern Africa. The comparison of intercalf period between herds is no measure of relative fertility, based on what we've said earlier. Secondly, the comparison of intercalf period within a herd for different age groups, meaning different seasonal environments, is also no measure of relative fertility. The comparison of intercalf period within the same age group, in the same herd, for the same birth season, is a potential measure of relative fertility if the animals were treated in the same management group. So, intercalf period compares or measures predominantly differences in management. And it's significantly important that we as breeders recognize that. It's a practical fact, that's how it's set up, and it is just one of those things that we've got to accept as a fact. If we move on to days to calving, which is an AGBU trait or an ABRI trait or a breed plan trait, whichever identity you want to give to it. I've copied this from directly from the AGBU data sheet. It's one of the most economical important traits in beef cattle operation. Is there a question? And it's the ability of a cow to get in calf every year, preferably early in season. It's available in breed plan. It's a genetic indicator of fertility that's easy to measure under paddock mating in a beef herd. Can be used to identify sires whose daughters are more fertile and tend to calf earlier in the season. So important here, the Australians and AGBU suggest we should develop days to calving and the measure thereof to the extent that it's not a female measure, but it starts creating differentiation on sires. How is it being measured? It's a simple measure where you fill in a data sheet where you've got a bull in date and a bull out date, and it calculates based on the actual calving date, the days to calving of that animal. Cows or heifers that conceive shortly after they're exposed to the bull will have shorter days to calving records than those that conceive late in the joining period. Estimated breeding values for days to calving are calculated using only paddock joining records. What that is saying, guys, is you have to have a calving season. If you don't have a mating season, if you don't have a mating season, it doesn't work. Cows that don't calve are assigned a penalty days to calving record. And up to 6 records for days to calving on an individual cow are used to increase the accuracy of the EBV. And then importantly, a low or negative EBV is desirable. So negative is better. The analysis looks at the management group, the joining management group definition, and it includes all cows in a herd joined to the same bull in the same year and month. So that's how they define a management group. Maiden heifers are grouped separately. Second calf heifers are also analyzed separately and are further split according to their lactation status. And this is all due to the complexity of analyzing fertility amongst females. The effects of differences in age and lactation status in older cows on days to calving are adjusted. So you can see from this that the scientists have taken a significant effort to differentiate all the different factors that has an effect on days to calving. So even though it's a simple trait for us as farmers to measure and to submit data, the scientist that's backing us up has done an excellent job on differentiating between the things that creates differences. Inclusion of non-calvers are extremely important. They are the cows that represent the poorer fertility. We have to include them in the genetic evaluation. And the way that the scientist treats them or the evaluation treats them is to give it a penalty of 25 days of the worst performer. So in that group, that management group that we discussed earlier, where depending on whether it was a maiden heifer or a first calver or an older cow, that management group, in that group, the one that calved last, 21 days is added to the non-calvers in that group, and that's how the data is being used. From a genetic correlation perspective, the heritability of days to calving is 8%. Now that is low, but that is typical for female fertility. More importantly, the repeatability is 19%. That indicates the benefit that exists from including several records in the prediction of days to calving. It's important to recognize that these repeat measures are in fact the same trait. So even though we repeat the measure on the same cow up to 6 times, we're in essence measuring the same trait. The genetic correlation between days to calving records from different parities is close to unity. In other words, they have done the background mathematical checks to make sure that it's true that it is the same trait that's being measured over the life of a cow. And then this means that a days to calving record from heifers is the same trait as days to calving at later parity. This is very important as it means firstly that days to calving records can be obtained early from maiden heifers, and secondly, repeat days to calving records of a cow increases the accuracy of the EBV. The genetic correlation between days to calving and calving success, in other words, did she calve or did she not calve, is also very high. This is encouraging as it shows the days to calving as a measure of calving success, but it has the added benefit of being able to distinguish between early and late calvers. The very low heritability of calving success means that culling open cows will make less progress than using days to calving EBVs. I'm going to repeat this because this is profound. The very low heritability of calving success means that culling open cows will make less progress than using days to calving EBVs. Please go and think about what that means in practice in what you do on your farm. What makes good data for days to calving? You must record all joinings of every cow, especially maidens, even if they are joined to another breed. The details required are typically the type of mating, natural, hand, AI, or ET, accurate bull-in and AI dates and birth dates, approximate dates are no good, identification of the joining sire, correct disposal and transfer codes, particularly cows that are culled for infertility, and you've got to record cows leaving the inventory that are either deregistered or passed on to a commercial herd or to another herd. So it's important that you have got a complete set of data of all females that you had in your herd for the complete year. And in that way, you make sure that you get the best days to calving data. Other considerations? It's important for breeders to also measure scrotal circumference on all yearling bulls. This provides data for culling and also contribute to the accuracy of days to calving. So there is a recorrelation there that can improve the accuracy. Selection for increased fertility in your herd will be relatively slow However, with repeat calvings, the benefit will accumulate over times, and accuracy on days to calving will be low until a large number of daughters have records. Guys, what this is saying is just start with it and start doing it. In a number of years, you will start to see the benefit. If you've done it by the time that a significant portion of your female herd has got more than 3 and 4 measurements, and their parents, their dams, has also had more than 3 or 4 measurements, then suddenly you will start seeing days to calving records for your bulls. Other fertility tests, e.g. serving capacity, can be important to lift your phenotypic calving rate. Then I move on to other scientific studies that are being done or has been done. You see the picture of Mark Walcott there on the right-hand side. He's done this research with AGBU where they've looked at age of puberty. And I'm just going to allow you to read through this, but basically they've done a lot of work on age of puberty, and they have got studies that age of puberty could be an accurate or an improved aspect to measure, or an aspect to measure to improve the accuracy of fertility. There is a graph that they've established during that research which shows what's the heritability of the trait, which is quite high if you look at it, heritability of between 0.5 and 0.6. So that is extremely promising. Obviously, the challenges of measuring it is what keeps us back. Then the next measure that they have looked at is lactation anestrus interval, and they've also looked at that part of it. They've done a lot of research on it, and they found that that is also a trait to be considered, at least in research environments, again, due to the complexity of measuring it. They've seen significant variation, which is a good thing. So as you can see here, there, Mark Walcott confirms it's expertise intensive to measure it, but it's good data to have in research environments such that you can improve the general fertility measurement in your national herd. So a breed society should consider to have in his BGP program a few herds that consider to measure these, herds that have got high levels of total testing. If one move on to the male traits, then the challenges that we sit with is that genetics is obviously important, and currently what we measure is scrotal circumference. There is good studies that show a positive genetic association between semen quality, although it varies with genotype, in other words, from breed to breed, and it also varies depending on the age of the bull. And that makes intuitive sense if you think about it. A younger bull semen quality most probably won't be similar to an older bull semen quality. Nevertheless, it is recognized as a major determinant of bull fertility, and the most heritable measure among semen quality traits is the percentage normal sperm, or PNS. So PNS is not a difficult to measure trait if you think about it. Most of the vets that we get in to test the bulls can do that at any rate, and it is something that could be considered to be added to scrotal circumference and hopefully improve our understanding of male fertility. The lack of consistent, strong genetic correlations between PNS and other heritable bull traits suggests that the existence of a single reliable indicator of bull fertility across breeds is not among those measured. So the challenge is we need to carefully consider what do we measure. That's what they are trying to convey here. Their studies have also shown that the inhibitin and IGF-1 percentages in the semen has got a moderate genetic association with % normal sperm. So you could ask your vet to go and establish that and give you a report on that. And you could then get better data to understand that. They've also found that body condition score in specifically Brahmins and sperm motility, the mass and the individual motility of the sperm traits, those in both genotypes are referring to Brahmins as well as tropical composites, had moderate to strong genetic correlation with the percentage normal sperm, and it may prove useful candidates for indirect selection. So basically, where the research is looking at is what are the additional measures that could be considered either in research environments or in day-to-day commercial stud farming to be added so that you can build a battery of fertility traits to improve your fertility assessment and the EBV traits. That's in basics what they say. So in summary, if we look at fertility, then on females, intercalving period is not comparable over herds or seasons. Day-to calving is a true measure of female fertility as a genetic trait. AP and LRA are potential measures to improve female fertility. On the male side, the current measure is restricted to scrotal circumference. The measurement of percentage normal sperm can add value. The understanding of the inhibitor IGF-1 could be considered, and together with a body condition score and sperm motility, those measures could also add value. And that is currently the state of the science as far as fertility measures are concerned. So, difficult topic, difficult subject, but the scientists are applying their mind and trying to understand better ways to approach this. Thank you for your time.
There we go. Thank you very much, Thijs. I think we've pushed a lot in this morning, and I think you'll all agree that difficult to measure traits are probably the most important traits, because you've got fertility that's significantly important, and then you have feed efficiency that is also significantly important for the cow herd and for the feedlot sector. And then we talked about meat quality in South Africa, not a big role yet, but it's going to become a big role. Are there any questions to Thijs or any of the speakers? If any questions to anybody? Otherwise, let's give them all a round of applause. If you go to more there, you'll see your, you can clap hands. If there's no questions, we can give them just a show of hands. But thanks for your participation. Thanks very much, Thijs and Meki and Izan. This was, I think, one of the better sessions that we've had since we started this in March. I think it was, if I remember correctly, 2 weeks' time we'll have Kobus talking about profitability in a beef enterprise. Kobus is an economist, and that's his forte. All these videos are recorded and available on YouTube, on the internet, so you can get these recordings on the internet as well. And they provided to you by the Herdmaster program, South Africa's leading farm management program, for which there's full-time support. So we appreciate a lot your participation, and we'll see you guys again in 2 weeks' time. Thank you very much.
Cheers, guys.
Good. Thanks, John. You found that useful?
Yeah, I did. Thank you, Michael. Michael, I have, sorry.